How's it going, everyone? Carlo and Dylan here from All You Can Board, back in the middle of our top 50 countdown, top 50 games of all time, our 2022 edition, of course. We are now counting down games 30 to 21. If you missed 50 to 41 and 40 to 31, you can go check those out, either links in the description below. Otherwise, without further ado, we're just going to get right into it, I think.
Yeah, and I have a bunch of games on this one that were not on my list at all last year. I think out of these 10, we're going to talk about 5 of them were not on my top 50.
Wow, okay. Two of mine here are new to my list, and almost all the others have dropped from previous years.
All right. First one, number 30. I think this one's going to surprise you a little bit being this high. But I've also played a different different version, different coat of paint of this game. And that is Fantasy Realms.
Oh,
Number
wow.
30. So I played Marvel Remix, which is very similar, a couple of small changes, and I played Fantasy Realms a bunch as well. I love this game. I think it's for what it does and how simple the rule set is. I really resonate with having to join certain cards together and then change your strategy when you're not getting that, and then being punished by being like, oh, now it came up after I gave up, and the fact that you're discarding to the table and there's a fluctuating end game timer that the players can control by when they're pulling from the cards that are face up rather than drawing from the deck. I have to play the Marvel Remix version more to be sure that it's the Fantasy Realm version that I like more. I think that's going to be the case. Right. But both versions do really great stuff. It's just such a satisfying game for me to play. I'm glad that you picked it up and introduced it, because I would have skipped over it just based on it just seems so generic. Fantasy Realms as a theme, the artwork being generic and everything.
I overlooked it for a long time too, until I don't remember who it was that sold me on it. So.
Yeah, and I think it was nominated for Kennerspiel or something.
I think so, yeah. Late, because it got to Europe multiple years after it was released in North America.
Yeah, it's just this really solid game. I really like it. I want to play more of it. It's possible it could climb more. I think it's one I'll always just kind of default to, whether it's my version, the Marvel Remix, or yours, the original, that I'll just be like, want to throw down a quick Fantasy Realms or quick Marvel Remix before we go. That's what I did last night as we were recording this. It was great. Everyone loved it around the table. It's just a solid design and such a simple thing to learn. I love it.
Yeah, really quick. And I don't know if it's entirely novel. I'm sure there are other games do this, but I honestly I can't think of other games that we've played where you're not actually playing cards in front of you ever. You're just cycling cards in your hand, and what you're stuck with in your hand is that. Your 7-card hand is what you score, and that's kind of it. I don't know if we've played any other games that are that simple with that, and it's one of the best parts about the game.
Yep.
Solid game. Not quite in my top. Not quite my tempo.
Not quite my tempo.
Yeah. No, great game. Okay, number 30 on my list. This is a bit of an odd placement because it has gone up 3 spots from 33 last year, even though I haven't played it in the last year. It's probably been almost 2 years now that I've played it. Yeah. That is Dominion.
Wow, and it climbed.
So, yeah, part of the reason that it climbed is because there are other games that were ahead of it that have just dropped. There are games that I played where I've cooled on and they dropped 10, 15 spots kind of thing, whereas Dominion, I didn't play it, and this goes back to the thing we mentioned in the past couple videos, I think, where because it's one of my most played games of all time, including digital plays back in the day when I was really hooked on it, I've played this game probably upwards of 300-400 times or something, so my opinion of it is very solidified, so it's not going to be something that jumps up and down a bunch on my rankings over time. And the reason why, previously when I was looking at this list, when I did the list last year, I think I probably said, it's going to probably dip and move further and further down the list. But I found that after sort of overplaying it for a while and cooling on it a little bit, the itch to play it is coming back to me. As I've played other deck builders and stuff, and as I've just spent time away from it, and I knew that they released a new expansion a while ago, and I started looking at cards online that I had never played with before from other expansions, and I started feeling man, I really want to get playing, even if it's just the digital version online, because you can play games so quickly. But to me, it's still, in terms of pure deck builders where you're just building a deck of cards and that's it, and there's no other board or whatever, it's still my favorite one of those. I have it ahead of ones Hero Realms and Star Realms and that kind of stuff. There are at least one, maybe 2, I can't remember, deck builders that I have higher up on my list that do other stuff as well. But in terms of a pure deck builder, just the amount of combinations, what makes the game is that different market of 10 cards every time, and looking at that market of cards and trying to craft a strategy and figuring out what's the key, what's one of the sort of efficient ways to victory this game, and trying to spot that and then execute it is awesome. But I'll really only ever want to play it again with 2 or 3 players. I think with 4 there's way too much downtime, especially with cards that introduce drawing cards and getting more actions, and sometimes it just gets a bit unwieldy. But yeah, Dominion is probably always, or for a long time, I think, going to stay somewhere in my top 50. I could see it moving higher up if I get back back into it and play more expansions, but I think it earns a spot right now at number, what was that, 30? Yeah, 30.
Yeah, I mean, Dominion, I still think it's a good game. It's never going to go into my top 50 now. Like, I've seen everything I'm going to see with Dominion. And instead of saying
you haven't played most of the expansions.
Well, like, the expansions aren't going to change my mind on Dominion. Wow. And what's funny is the next game on my list, which I'm going to just jump right into, number 29, is not only my first Clank killer, but it's also a Dominion killer, I guess, in the same way.
I think I know what it is.
And that is Dune Imperium.
Oh, okay. It's not what I thought it was.
Yeah, so Dune Imperium debuts on my list. It was not on my list last year because I had not played it last year. I've played it now, I think 3 times, or 2 or 3 times. I played it on the live stream. Yeah. I really, really like what Dune does. And I'm realizing with deck builders and in general, I think what's going to kind of happen for me with that genre is I am going to have a lot of ebbs and flows in games that show up my top 50 that I'm really hot on and then I cool on, and that could be the case with Doom because there's so many of them that release and they all find different interesting ways to kind of exist in what they're doing. Like for instance, like Arnak was on my list last year and isn't this year.
I was just going to ask. I was going to say I think
it was my 40 to 50 or whatever. Dune, I think, is just a much better game, and I just love the restrictions on where you can place workers based on the cards and the symbols that are on them. It's like my favorite thing about that game, and in also addition to like that combat area, the conflict area, I just have so much fun playing Dune Imperium, and I want to play it so much more. And the third thing I really love about it is that the scoring is so low. It makes every point matter so much, and I love that about it. So this shoots up from being non-existent to 29. It could honestly climb more in the years to come if I continue to play it a lot and I play the expansion.
Yeah, the next time we play it, it'll be with Rise of X for sure. We're ready for it.
It's a really, really solid game. I'm glad that I finally got it to the table, and now one of my top games. Really like it.
Yeah. For anyone who missed previous videos, I had it at, what was it, like 44 or something? Like yeah. Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Honestly, I'm pleasantly surprised to see it this high on your list. I thought it was going to be on your list because I remember after you played it, I knew you had a good impression of it. And yeah, great game. We'll have to play it a lot more. Okay, number 29 on my list is a game that dropped 6 spots down from number 23. It's a very simple, very quick filler game we've talked about on the channel many times. We also played this one during the live stream. I actually got to play this one on live stream with my son and my wife, which is part of the nostalgia factor here for me, or just the kind of memorable aspect of it. But that is Colorado. Yeah, it was, what did I say, 23 last year, 23? Yeah, so very, very simple game. It's just cards with colors, basically. The chameleon art doesn't factor into the gameplay at all. The basic idea of the game is you're flipping a card from a deck and choosing which row on the table to place the card in. Once the rows fill up with 3 cards, they can't have any more cards placed on them. On your turn, instead of actually flipping a card and adding it to a row, you can just take a row of whatever cards are there, whether it's 1, 2, or 3. Once you do that, you're out of the round. You keep playing around this until the game ends, and at the end, you're only going to score points in, I think they call it like the triangular scoring, where it's like 1 card of a color is 1 point, 2 cards is 3 points, etc. They kind of exponentially go up, and you only score for your 3 highest colors. Everything else is negative. So it's, for how simple it is, it's such an interactive game. You owe every single card almost that's placed on the table. There's someone else around who's either going to swear at someone or say like, I can't believe you did that. Oh, this jerk over here. Like every time you're playing cards, you just know that someone is looking around. They're like, oh yeah, you're going for orange, but you really don't want to put blue, hey? Well, then I'll put this orange card in the row with the blue, and someone's like, oh. Do I take it? Is it worth it? The whole game is a series of trade-offs. What do you want to let go? What garbage do you want to take with the good stuff? Yeah, it's just distilled such a simple game. I dismissed it for a long time when I first got into the hobby because I thought the box card, again, like it looked like there wasn't much to the game. But if you haven't tried it, you really should. Some of the people we've recommended this to in our Discord have come around and said like, oh man, I'm really glad that I found out about this game because yeah, there's a lot more to it than I expected. So yeah, I'll never turn down a game of this. Yeah, Colorado.
Nice. Yeah, it just missed mine. Or not just, like it's not like it was 51 or something, but pretty close. I do really like it. I know you like it more than I do, but it's another game that every time I might not suggest it because I don't own it either, or on BGA. Actually, on BGA I would suggest it, but it's one that every time I've played it, I will really enjoy it. I will continue to enjoy it. It just, I think it's going to have a hard time squeaking into my top 50.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's one that I think, doesn't hold up quite the same as 1 or 2 other fillers for me, but it's still one of my favorite filler games for sure. Colorado.
Cool. 28 for me, also debut on the list, 3rd in a row debut on the list. This is a campaign game that I played through the entirety of, which doesn't always happen, and I really, really love this game. Can't wait for the sequel. That is The King's Dilemma.
Oh, of course. Yes. Yeah, I was trying to think about campaign game.
I mean, campaign games for me are always going to resonate a lot. They're always going to kind of shoot up onto a list or climb really high and then won't go any higher because it's done.
Yeah, you don't revisit it. Yeah.
But with this one, I mean, maybe it will eventually get replaced with the Queen's Dilemma. I played through the entirety of this. I think it was 13 sessions, or maybe not 13 sessions, 13 games. Sometimes we did multiple sessions in a row. It is such an interesting game in that the entire game is really dependent on how much you're going to kind of buy into the story, the narrative, your house, their role, your the way your house will approach the game, and your private goals, secret objectives, right. And how much you're really going to get into the negotiation and the discussion around the table, because our group got really, really into that, and I think that really made my experience. Everyone bought into not only debating around the table for the reasons of wanting to win, but also on their house's goals and how their house and their character would play, and the role-playing aspect.
I was going to say, knowing one of the people you played with, Corbin, I can only imagine. I'm jealous that I wasn't there for Corbin's role-playing.
It was unreal. The
voices that he does in this game.
We'd all be kind of saying our reasoning why we want to vote, and then we'd all kind of look over to Corbin. He'd lean back in his chair and be like, "Well,
twirls his mustache.
House Brock has a different way of looking at it." And we'd all be like, "Oh my God, here we go."
What's he gonna say?
Yeah, it was such a great time. I love this game. It's such a great experience. I'm so glad that Queen's Dilemma is coming out. We've backed it as a group to be able to play again. Honestly, I just wish it was coming out sooner. I think this is one that if you have the right group for, if you like the discussion and the debate around the table, it's really just a voting game that you are going after your interests and manipulating tokens on the board. If that discussion, that voting thing is something that you think you have a group for that would resonate with, highly recommend checking this out. Honestly, the biggest thing just to know going in is some of the content can be, the narrative and where it goes, and some of the topics you're dealing with are like very adult topics, and so you have to be able to separate, like, this is just a game and me voting on something is how I stand in real life. But you can also approach it that way and be like, in real life I can never vote for this, so I'm not going to vote for it here.
Right. It's almost a similar thing as like cheering for the bad guys in Game of Thrones.
Exactly.
Like it's not because you actually think this person would be someone you'd cheer for in real life, but it's like the context of the show.
If you have ever watched Game of Thrones though, and you were like, my favorite scenes are the ones where they're just talking around the King's Council table or whatever. Right, that's basically what this game is.
That's what I imagine it as. Yeah.
It's great. King's Dilemma, number 28.
Awesome. I have this one on, I've ordered it. It's just kind of on hold, and I can't wait to play it. It's kind of one of my goals for 2023 is to get a group and play this based on everything you've told me about it. So I can't wait to try it. Yeah. All right, number 28 on my list is one that might surprise you how much it has dropped from last year. It is down 12 spaces. So last year it was number 16, and that is Kingdom Builder.
Oh, wow. Okay, that dropped more. I was expecting to drop not that much, though.
Yeah, and for a while, I think, like, obviously last year when we did our 2021, our top 50 list in 2021, at that time it was the first time we had done a top 50. I think previously, if you'd asked me like 5 years ago or so, this was probably a top 10 game for me for a long time. Yeah. But I think once I got about 50 or 60 plays in is where I started to cool on it, and over time, even though I thought I stopped playing it for a while, and then I came back and I thought like, oh, maybe I don't know if it'll hold up. I went back and played on Board Game Arena a couple of years ago, and I remember getting back into it for a while and being like, no, this is still like one of the better games around. But what is making it eventually, drop down the list is something I've talked about before, which is like every once in a while, maybe 1 or 2 out of every 10 games, I end up having a setup of the power tokens, like the abilities on the map, as well as the scoring conditions, make for an unsatisfying experience. And there's sometimes where I just wish like maybe we would just take some of those out of the box or not play with them, but then it also reduces the variability and options that you get. Yeah. And I just find like if the game doesn't have the little paddock one where you're jumping or the water tile ability, if neither of those are present, it immediately goes from like a 9 out of 10 game to me to like a 7 out of 10. Like I don't like a lot of the powers that are in the base game there, and I haven't played the expansions, so I think there are some times where I go back to it where I have these amazing plays and I'm like, damn, that was a good game of Kingdom Builder. And then there are other ones where I end up feeling a little disappointed, and sometimes that randomness factor of like, I'm third in turn order, and by the time I get my first turn of the game, that one key spot has already been surrounded by the other players, and now I draw a card that has a land type that doesn't really work for me at all, and I'm going to get stuck, and sometimes the luck factor just feels a bit punishing. So I know I feel bad because I'm highlighting a lot of the negatives about the game, when again, like, my 28th favorite game of all time that I've played upwards of 100 times that I will still never turn down a game of. There's just an alternative, which you might suspect what it is, that will come up later in the list that I'm leaning towards now.
Oh, it's going to come up later in the list.
Absolutely.
Wow, okay. That's surprising to me. I didn't. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a conflicting feeling because it's done so much for me in the hobby, and like I would champion this game to anyone who likes these kind of like, it's not very thematic. It's sort of an abstract game, and it's very restrictive and tight and punishing kind of thing. But yeah, incredible game, and I think it doesn't get the respect it deserves. There's a lot of people who this game didn't click for, and I feel like a lot of people avoid it because of some of the reviews they saw. But everyone owes it themselves to at least try this game.
Cool. I'll have more to say about this later.
Yeah,
but,
I figured.
Good pick. It didn't fall I think I did I say I think I already said, but like I think I expected it to fall, but not quite this much. So,
right. Yeah.
Anyways, number 27 for me, not on the list last year, but I think it was either
4 in a row, new then?
Yeah, but I think this one was either an oversight or I just didn't give it its due based on the plays I had. I didn't realize how special it was to me, and so now it's debuting at 27. That is For Sale.
Nice.
So For Sale is a great game. We actually played it like 2 days ago. It's a really great game. I'll continue to play this on not only Board Game Arena, but in person. We both have our own little travel copy that is easy to get to the table. It's so satisfying to play every single time. So much hilarity around the table, especially with the way everyone bids a little bit differently and a little more aggressively or a little more passively. Every time we've introduced this to someone who has not experienced it, even if they have never played it before with people that have, they always are still in contention. They always leave going, man, that's actually a really good little game. Like it surprises people all the time for a game that can come in a box this big with just cards and some money tokens to be able to have this 2-phase system, which is something we just love in games, and do it so effectively is a testament to how good it is. I'm glad I'm finally rectifying and putting this on the list. It's at 27 now. It could climb. This could be the spot where it stays at for a bit. Regardless, I think it's gonna be a mainstay on my top 50 now because I played it a lot this year, and I think that just kind of solidified to me how much I really do enjoy this game.
Yeah, it just never gets old, and the fact that it goes up to 5 or 6 players is which is where the sweet spot is, I think, with 5 or 6. Yeah, amazing game, and I may or may not have more to say at a later date about this game. Who truly knows?
If you don't, that means it didn't make your list, and I get to trash you for it. So.
Well then, okay, I will talk about it. Coming in at number 27. This is a game that dropped 9 spots from last year, so it used to be at number 18. The main reason that it dropped is that I haven't played it in the last year since it ranked there, so that's pretty much all there is to it. That is Noosefjord. So I know you had it, at 40-something?
Yeah,
yours, and I think last year I had it a little bit higher than you too, so I do think I've enjoyed this game just a little more than you in the past. And part of it, I think, is because it feels like almost like a lighter version, a quicker, lighter version of Agricola in some ways. Like there's not a ton of similarities in the flow of the game, but just in the really tight aspect of the worker placement with very limited spots and the very kind of, there's just a lot of competition for really central spots on the board that everyone kind of has to go to at certain points. So there's a lot of neglecting other options you'd rather take because you kind of feel like, well, if I don't do this now, I'm going to lose the opportunity, or my opponent's going to get something good for it. So very interactive game. The theme is just like, fishing. It's maybe a little less appealing to a lot of people than a lot of other Uwe Rosenberg games, and I think that's why maybe a lot of people tend to overlook this one. But it sits in a really nice spot for me. Obviously, I have this ahead of ones like Feast for Odin and Hallertau that were lower on my list. I don't know if it's going to hold up. Like, I've still only played it, I think, twice or maybe 3 times at most, and I've only ever played it with 2 players with you. So I need to try it a few more times and at different player counts and see some more of the, I know there's different levels of the building cards or tiles that come up or whatever, so I need to see more of that to see, is this game something that had a really strong first impression? Am I going to cool on it? Is it going to be something that I can play upwards of, 20, 30 plus times? Am I going to need my own copy kind of thing? But right now, I really like the game, and the fact that it plays in, like, usually... I think when we played, because it was refreshing on rules, I think it took maybe a bit over an hour, but I can see us crushing this in 45 minutes to an hour when we're familiar with it. So Noosefjord is a really good game, and if you've ever overlooked it just because of the fishing theme or you thought there might not be much to it, definitely give it a shot, because it's a really, really good game. One of the better worker placement games I've played for sure, and I hope to play it a lot more over the next year. Yeah,
I already talked about it. The only thing I'll say is I really do want to play this with 3. That's the kind of most intrigued to try it out at. Me too. I think we need to just suggest it next time we have a third person, like Braden or something like that, and just play it.
I think in terms of the interactivity on the board and the playtime, that's probably going to be the sweet spot. So Noosefjord, number, what
27.
Was that? 27.
I think 27, 26, 27. So 26 for me the last game straight in a row debuting on the list
Wow,
again.
all coming in together in a pack.
Somehow that happened. I'm surprised I have this higher than you. I don't know why, but I guess you also said you cooled on. I thought yours was going to be higher than mine.
Oh, I know what this is.
It's Cascadia.
Yeah.
I need to get my own copy of this. I really like Cascadia. And it's funny that our experience with Cascadia started with us playing a prototype and playing it incorrectly, and now it's like what game we both
or overlooking,
enjoy.
or we didn't technically play it wrong, but we
overlooking the scoring thing. The way it scores and how much there is to think about with a system that is essentially just pick a pair and add them to your board. Like that's essentially the game. Pick a pair of stuff, add them to your planer. That's like essentially all you're doing. But the nuance and everything that comes with the decision making of that is so satisfying to me. The theme is so beautifully integrated, and it could easily be a game that I could just rely on once I have it in my collection to like be a go-to for people that haven't played board games or have but just want like a lighter experience. I've also talked with a friend of mine who lives, my friend Dexter, who lives in Vancouver now, and he's now gotten into Cascadia and plays it a whole bunch. Like it is bringing people into the hobby. It's now won the Spiel des Jahres.
I think it's either just into the top 50 now on Board Game Geek too, or just outside the top 50. So and very well deserved.
Totally, it is one. It is, again, one of those rare ones that we're both going to end up having a copy of, along with a couple others, because of just how reliable it is for me having fun, but also just, like I said, introducing other people and a go-to game when you can't really decide what to play. So I love this game. It might climb more, but I just need to get my own copy and play it more often to know. Yeah,
this is going to be one of those games that if you continue to watch our channel over the years, like this is probably going to be one of the games we continue to recommend a lot in a lot of different categories and stuff, just because it's such a guaranteed, safe, guaranteed good time every single time.
And not for everybody, because not everyone likes that integration of drafting that way and like bringing it back, and maybe that feels repetitive to people over time. But in general, like for me, it's so far been satisfying every time, and that never really stops being satisfying for me. But
I find it interesting with this game that I think when we did our most anticipated games of 2021, I had this at like I think number 2, and I don't think you had it on yours. No. And then I had other games that I played that went a bit ahead of it, so I cooled on it a little bit. And then for you, you're like, I overlooked it a bit, and it kind of and we kind of flat went past each other, and I'm wondering if next year they'll even each other back out or what's going to happen. But I'm glad to see it on your list now. It's really good game. Okay, on to 26 for my list here. Just like Newsfjord previously, this one was also one spot ahead of Newsfjord last year. So this also dropped 9 spots from 17, and that is Glass Road. So these are games that even when I ranked these last year right next to each other, I mentioned they fall in a very similar spot for me. And because I didn't get to play Newsfjord again, but I have played Glass Road a couple times in the past year, and I still really enjoy it. Obviously, it's still ranked very high for me, but I don't think it's ever going to move any higher up the list now. I think I've played Glass Road enough times in my life, and I've had it in my collection for, I think I got it around 2014 or 15. So I've played it enough times and owned it for long enough that I know it's not going to suddenly become a top 10 game for me or anything like that. And I don't think it'll work its way back into the top 20. So I think now it's just a matter of time, like how many more years until this potentially eventually leaves the list, but it falls into that similar spot of Newsfjord where it gives you the feel of a much heavier game than it actually is in terms of the length and the duration. We've covered this on an Own It, Play It, or Skip It video on the channel, so I won't get too into it, but you play over 4 rounds. Everyone has the same hand of 15 specialist cards, and the main crux of the game is that you're trying to pick cards to play that you anticipate are going to be cards that your other opponents either are or aren't playing, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. You might be able to get more cards played if you can guess correctly what other people are playing, but if you're playing cards at the same time as people, you each are only going to get one of the cards' 2 abilities. So some cards you're trying to be the only one to play, other cards you want to specifically play what other people are playing, and then it's this very efficient resource wheel system that you use to buy buildings and stuff. Very cool game. Like, always have a great time when I play it. I just think, I don't think it's going to move up, and I guess that's pretty much it.
It's a game that I don't have on my list, and it's honestly just because I don't own it and I don't play it enough. Glass Road always is one of those ones that I just feel reminded of every time I play. Like, oh yeah, right, that's such a good game. But
it's been a while now.
And it's always gaps between when I play it. Like if I played it, it's not on Board Game Arena, is it?
No.
If I could play it consistently, I could see this being a game that spends some time in like the 40 to 50 range for me. Like it is a solid game that has mechanics that I really love, and I just just don't play it nearly enough. So
I'm guilty of it too. I don't advocate for it to get played enough in my collection. Maybe because I've played it a decent amount of times, but yeah, we'll make a push to play it at least once or twice this year. It's really good at every player count, solo to 4. That's one of the biggest strengths of the game, is like every count is really, really good.
Number 25 for me, technically dropping from 21, but also debuting, and that'll make sense when I say what it is, because that's the Crew Mission Deep Sea. So I'm replacing Quest for Planet 9 with Mission Deep Sea because I think it's just a better version. Essentially the same game with a different skin and different little additions. But so Mission Deep Sea is the pinnacle version of the Crew that currently exists, and in my opinion, and it's just a really, really solid cooperative trick-taking game. Like, it does those two things very, very well. In terms of cooperative games, it is just fantastic. In terms of trick-taking games, the way that it integrates trick-taking, but having to like feel like, how am I going to complete these missions, and how am I going to let them complete their missions, or not fail completely in what I'm playing. You're thinking of so many different things from a single card play. And then you're so satisfied when you figure out the puzzle of how to order these cards and sometimes get out of a hole that somebody has accidentally put you into or whatever, while having to like have different restrictions on every mission, or different tasks on every mission, or different things to think about on every mission with limited communication. Like, everything about it is just an addictive experience. It's always tons of fun. If I played this more consistently, it could have honestly been higher. I know that you like this game even more than I do, and I like it a lot. It falls 4 spots, but really that's not because it's a lesser experience. It's just been bumped because of other games that have been joining the list. It's still such a solid game.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that it stayed relatively high on your list. It's so good, and I'll have more to say about it another time. All right. On to number 25 on the list, and I think this is only my second one so far that has stayed right where it is from last year. I've played it once since the last time I ranked it, and I've had a very, very similar opinion. So that is Fayum. So this was one of my absolute top games of 2021. I had it at number 3. And yeah, this is just a game that is... I find myself thinking about this game a lot when I'm not playing it. And every time that I see it on my shelf or whatever, I find myself thinking about the card play again and just the system and wanting to go back and explore it. I've mentioned on the channel before that what holds me back from playing it a little more is the game usually... I've only played it twice again, and both times the first time we all learned it together, and then the second time it was the same 3 players, but it had been a few months and we were kind of refreshing on the rules. And part of the kind of like a barrier to this game is that with a huge deck of, I think it's like 60-some cards that all have pretty unique abilities, like there's some overlap, but a big chunk of that first time you play, and even the second time, is looking in the glossary. Like, even when cards come out in the market, you're like, what does that one do? Okay, let's open up this book, and you read it out aloud, and then later people are like, sorry, what does that one do again? So that's the barrier, is the length of the game and kind of getting to know what the cards and the iconography mean. But everything else about the game I really like. The way you're kind of playing, you have 3 options on your turn. You either play a card from your hand, you buy a card from the market if you can afford it, or you basically rest, which is an administration action, to take back the top 3 cards from your discard pile. You can pay an extra $1 to take back additional cards. So you're basically having this ever-evolving deck throughout the game where you're choosing when to play cards, when to hold which ones to buy, when to switch up your strategy. It's a very interactive map, like very interactive game, piggybacking off other players, designed by Friedemann Friese. Just a really interesting game that I want to dig into a lot more. This is one that could go either way because I've only played it twice. It could be one that, drops a fair amount if I have like another couple bad plays, or if it never gets under that 2-hour mark or whatever. But it also could go higher if I see something with those combos, and maybe with 4 or 5 players it might even improve in my books. But yeah, Fayum is a game I really am eager to play again soon.
Yeah, I'm not surprised it still holds that spot for me. Like we've talked about before. Out of the 2 plays I've had, the same issue arose both times, and that is just simply, I love so many of the mechanics. I love all the things you described. I think are so awesome about Fayum. It has always been that what the cards I end up, or with the way the game's going, the way the board is looking, there is a clear way, almost like what you said about that your one instance of root. There's a clear way that if I'm going to have a chance to win or get the most points, that I should be playing. But the way that goes ends up making it a little bit less engaging for me, because I now know what my turns are pretty much well before they get back to me. So I'm waiting for people to go, and it comes back to him like, yeah, I'm doing this, and it's your turn.
Right, and it removes a bit of the decision
because I have my
space for you,
engine,
yeah.
and both times that has just worked out the way where I've had my engine. It makes sense to just stick with it, but then it makes it a little bit less fun and engaging for me. And because that's been my experience both times, I don't know if that's a fluke or I don't know if that's just like the way that you kind of settle into fame. And if it is, that's a little bit less interesting to me. But if it was just a fluke and next time I play, I have this ever-changing experience, maybe my opinion changes.
Yeah.
But.
And I'm hoping, because I totally agree with you on that actually. It's like once you have a combo, if people don't do enough to stop you, why would you not keep cashing in on that really good combo? So I'm hoping that was a result of your two opponents, me and Jeff, not being experienced enough at the game to spot it and stop you early enough.
Right.
And or a combination of that, or the fact that with 4 or 5 players, hopefully that problem will dissipate a bit more as it's more interactive. But if that continues to be an issue game after game, that will be what makes it drop on my list too. So
yeah, for sure.
Who knows? It's up in the air, but for now it's at 25. That is fam.
Cool. 24 for me is dropping 12 spots from 12 last year. Still really enjoy this game, and that is Ethnos. I just have not played it this year, and other games are competing for those 1 to 20 spots. It's a great game that with I don't want to say ugly art because the art is well drawn. It's just less interesting art, but it is so interesting to have a area control game in such a small, accessible package, because I am finding I really do enjoy that genre. I just don't often play the larger experiences like Rising Sun or Blood Rage or Inish and stuff like that very often.
Yeah, and those can be very unforgiving games, and Ethnos isn't as unforgiving.
No, and those games are also like usually like main event games, where Ethnos often has been like one of the games we've played, and it's because of the time it takes and just it's accessible. And I just still love how every single game is different depending on which races, factions are in the game. That is something that in every game I'm always going to love, when there's different combinations that now make for a different experience compared to the last time you played, even if you've played it 5 times, 7 times, 10 times. That's the present in Ethnos, having the skeletons in one game, or having not the halflings, the hobbits, whatever it is, not the hobbits, the halflings. Like it's different depending in combination with other factions. So I love that. I love how quick the game and quick the turns go, and the competition for the areas, and how that ever evolves as you go. And each one has a different scoring based on the way you randomly place tiles. So that changes too. Yeah. It's just
dumping the cards that you having to discard the cards you didn't play, and then everyone else grabs that good stuff. And you're like, I shouldn't have kept drawing cards.
Yeah, it's just a solid experience that I don't hear a lot of people talk about very often, but I still to this day just really, really enjoy playing. If I had played it more, it might have not dropped as much or not dropped at all. And if I play it again in this upcoming year a bit more, maybe it'll kind of regain those spots. But it's fallen for now to 24, but my opinion hasn't really changed on it too much.
Yeah, the very generic art obviously hurts the game and makes a lot of people kind of not really give it a chance. This was I think I had it at number 40 last year, and this is another one that was in that 50 to 60 range this year, that just because I also didn't play it.
Yep.
But I will say right now, if they do ever reprint this with new art and stuff, I'll probably buy myself my own copy, because like this is a game that I'd like be thrilled to have in my own collection. It's a really good one.
Yep.
Glad to see it's still pretty high up on your list, and we got to make a point to play it more because of how quick it is, right?
Agreed.
And the fact that it goes up to 6.
I know, we have to play it with 6.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, number 24 on the list is, so this one's new to the list this year, and this is one that I was kind of hinting at just a couple picks ago. This is Winter Kingdom.
Okay, yeah.
So I had it as my number 2 game of 2021, and I've mentioned, we talked about this, it's come up in a couple other videos on the channel so far. We haven't done a review because I've only played it twice, and we're going to do a video comparing Kingdom Builder to Winter Kingdom, especially because we've played so much Kingdom Builder. So this is a game that I could see potentially moving a lot higher on my list in the future. I could see that happening, but I could also see it potentially dropping. And we've talked before about we don't feel like we've gotten anywhere near the ideal experience of Winter Kingdom yet. It did a lot. Like, I didn't expect it to change the rules of Kingdom Builder as much as it did. I think we were both surprised when we played it. Like, man, this is actually a really different game. Like, yes, it has the core DNA of how many settlements you have and placing 3 on your turn and little things like that. This is the way that the scoring conditions work. But the way that you get your powers, you have a hand of ability cards that's unique from the other players instead of the abilities being things you get off the board. You have to get area majority around castles instead of just having 1 hex touching them. You have some of your settlements or special like forts that count for 2 pieces instead of 1. The map layout is completely different. There's tunnels. There's ways that you get income to even buy the ability cards that you then have to choose when to play. So the game has this interesting arc. And it addresses some of the issues I mentioned about Kingdom Builder with, the randomness isn't as punishing. There's more freedom to kind of like pivot and do something else if you get kind of blocked out of a spot that you needed to go, but it is still very interactive. You can still block. So there's a lot to explore. There's so much to take in, and there's so many possible options and permutations on your turn and long term throughout the game that it's so like it's truly like dizzying the first couple times you play it. Your head's spinning like, what am I doing here? Like, and sometimes you feel paralyzed on your turn, like I want to keep the game going, but I also don't want to do this awful bad play. So if we can get over that hump, I think this is going to be like a truly like masterpiece of a game for us that we'll play for, like basically forever. But I'm a little hesitant to put it higher on the list until I know if we're going to be able to get over that hump fully.
Yeah, I haven't decided whether that's true what you just said for me or not. Like, in some ways, I think it went too far in changing what I liked about Kingdom Builder, and I think it becomes a game I don't want from Kingdom Builder. But again, I think I just have to play it a few more times to really grasp that, and then I'll understand. But I'm not surprised that it's like higher than Kingdom Builder for you already. But yeah, it's a good game that I just don't. Maybe it's just I haven't had a good experience with it yet.
Yeah,
we'll
I think we had the eye-opening moment when we played the first few turns and had the rules, and we were like, oh my god, we think we're gonna like this a lot more. And then at the end, we were like, that was pretty rough. That was pretty thinky.
Totally.
Anyways, we'll have a lot more to say when we do our in-depth Kingdom Builder versus Winter Kingdom, but for now, it comes in at number 24.
Okay, number 23 is my biggest climber. And it climbed 17 spots from last year's list, from 40 to 23. And I think you're going to be so I was going to say impressed. You're going to be so pleased with me for this taking spot 23 from 40, and that is Blue Lagoon.
Oh, yes. Excellent. Because I remember last year I was like, man, you underrated this. I thought you liked it more.
Blue Lagoon's great. I credit a lot of how much I love it to how much I already loved Fjords, and like it's doesn't replace Fjords for me, or at least not right now, but it captures so much of what I love about Fjords in a slightly different package and with multiple ways to score. And it's interesting every time I play to try to figure out how I'm gonna what I'm gonna lean into to score and what I'm gonna have to abandon in some ways or not go as heavy into, but maybe I can't abandon it completely because I don't get enough points. And watching how every single time we play, you always just craft a long route. And now every time I play, I just want to stop you from doing that and having to get on all the islands. And
that's why the other person always beats us. Because you and I are always. It's always like the third player, Braden's always like, hey, you guys didn't really block me.
Oh man, it's
he beat us by 70 points last. Hey.
Was it the live stream we played this?
We did play, and we taught him for the first day.
Yeah,
he absolutely wrecked us, and we were like, I guess we should have been worrying about him a little bit.
Even though he wrecked us, I credit that to having to jump because it was such a great experience, and it reminded me just how good this game is. It's just a solid experience that has a two-phase system that we just love that in games. It's colorful, has a great theme, it looks great on the table, and just having to decide where to place your huts for the next round is so engaging, and it changes. Even though you're playing essentially the same game a second time, you're not, because starting at the huts is such a different
because you can't just spawn out of the water anywhere.
It's a great game. I love Blue Lagoon. I was surprised at first when I saw how much it climbed because I didn't expect that to be the game that was going to climb the most. Right. But it ends up being my biggest climber, 17 spots from 40 to 23.
This is the most satisfied I've probably been with any of your picks so far. I'm going to have more to say about the game, but the one thing I'll say right now, just I don't want to forget when it comes up later on my list, is that if you've ever played this with 2 players and you felt even like lukewarm or didn't like it or whatever, I urge you to give it another shot with 3 or 4, because this is one of those games that is like by far best with 3 or 4. It's still good with 2, but honestly, I never play it with 2. Anyways, Blue Lagoon, I'll have more to say about it.
Sweet, that's 23.
All right. 23 on my list has moved down 1 spot from 22 last year, and I don't think I even played it in the past year. That is Bonanza. So it's a game that this is a negotiation game, one of the most straightforward, pure negotiation games out there. It's an old Uwe Rosenberg game from, I think it was the 90s or early 2000s or something like that. But anyways, bean trading game, one of the very few games out there that does something. If you're familiar with Scout, basically you can't reorganize the order of your hand. You have cards from sort of front to back, and when you gain a new card, it always has to go to the back, and you can never rearrange the order of your hand, but you can trade beans from any part of your hand. So you have these little bean field mat in front of you that's going to track how many beans or types of beans you can plant, and you're basically the way the beans work is you're encouraged to get more and more types of a bean. Maybe if you get 4 of these beans, it's worth 1 point. Maybe if you can get up to 7 of them, now it's worth 2 points, and then you get up to 10, you get 3 points. So you're trying to get as many as you can before you're forced to harvest them, because every round, if you're not able to trade the 2 beans that are offered to you that are face up, you are forced to plant them in your bean fields. And if you don't have any room, you have to harvest an old one to make room for it. So you might be getting rid of beans before you even get any points from them to make room. So the negotiations go next level, because you're trying to offer something to someone as a deal, and they're realizing that you're trying to swindle them, and there's short and long-term agreements that you can make. You can backstab, it's such a fun game to play. It's very, very group dependent, and it can run a little longer than I'd like sometimes if everyone's trying to haggle every single deal as a little too much. So it is group dependent. It's not always going to hit the highest note, but my best plays of this are enough to keep it in this spot for me, and it's something that I really regret not having played in the past year. I think it's just a victim of a lot of these similar games in this similar weight are quicker games we've talked about that are fillers that just oh, well, if we only have this much time, we're not going to play Bonanza because it's probably going to take about an hour. But yeah, awesome game.
Yeah, I like Bonanza. I don't like it as much as you do, by probably a decent margin.
Yeah.
And I just think it's because for me, the negotiation and the systems that are in Bonanza, I just prefer in other games. And for me, the best part of Bonanza is the hand aspect.
Yeah.
But even that, I would
more
say
than the negotiation.
I think so in Bonanza specifically.
Okay, fair
yes. Enough. And to be fair, I'm not the biggest negotiation fan, and maybe that's because I never played Catan as my gateway game or something. But for whatever reason, I've had fun with it every time, but it's never really I've never left being oh, what a genius game, or what an experience.
Fair enough.
Whereas I know that's sort of the response you had to experience it.
Yeah. I think it also, I will say that I think we've played it with, or the couple times we've played it was with the same group, and that's not the group that I've had the most fun playing it with. I'll say that. So one time we'll try playing it a couple more times, and I'm curious to see if it'll improve
maybe
in your estimation. But either way, for now, that's number 23, Bonanza, down 1 spot from last year.
Number 22 for me was 14 last year, so it's dropping 8 spots just out of the top 20 now, and that is Champions of Midgard. So Champions of Midgard is a game that I haven't played this last year, and I think it's also just a victim of worker placement games are plenty. I love them. I'm going to keep playing them. I'm going to play lots, and I think I might have had maybe my best days of Champions of Midgard are behind me. I don't know. I'd have to introduce Champions to a group that hasn't played it yet, see how it resonates with them, see if they really like it and want to keep coming back to it, and then maybe I get the spark again, because I know when I incorporated the expansions for Champions, I really had the feeling of love come back, because I thought the expansions were a lot of fun, and it kind of changed things up and whatnot, felt fresh. I think it's an awesome worker placement game. I think that so much of what it does with having to choose who's going to fight either the Draugr or the trolls or whatever it is from attacking the village.
Yeah, that's my favorite part.
Going over the sea in the boats and having to try to manage how much am I going to bring with me, because how worried I am of what's in the sea things, or do I use that worker placement to look at the sea first so I can know what my voyage is going to be, how much do I trust that, and then fighting the monsters. For a long time it was my favorite worker placement game, and it's because of how much is going on in it, and I mean, it was my favorite worker placement game before a certain Uwe game came along.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's a great game still. It's falling and might continue to fall unless, like I said, I play it again. So I'm not surprised that it's slipping. But I think I've played a lot of it, and I think it might just be time to move on to other worker placement games. But regardless, if you haven't played it and you're a worker placement fan, I can't recommend it enough, because I think it's going to be something that resonates a lot. Honestly, the biggest problem is the board is gigantic. It takes up a lot of table space, but especially with the expansions.
Yeah, and you have to be okay with a bit of randomness in your worker placement games. I think that's the main reason why some people don't like it, or it doesn't.
All the dice rolling and everything.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of risk, and you have to be okay with that going in. But I was expecting this to have dropped more. I thought you would have had Zolkin over Champions of Midgard.
I think I need to play more Zolkin in a year for it, because I think
and
you're
in
right.
Person,
I think it will overtake it at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Champions of Midgard, eh? All right. Number 22 on my list has dropped 10 spots. So this was I know, especially when a game is ranked number 12, to drop 10 spots is quite a bit. But I think it'll make sense to you once I tell you what game this is. That is Keyforge.
Okay, yeah.
So this is I guess the world's first, and I think still only, unique deck game. I know there's been Soulforge Fusion and some other ones that have come around with borrowing some ideas and combining decks and stuff like that. But so Keyforge it was originally released as a 2-player only game. There's some little solo adventures you can play and stuff like that. But I guess I haven't played it a whole lot in the past year. I did for a while, and there's really only a couple people like one main person, my friend Patrice, who I play this with a decent amount these days still. So like sometimes months will go by, we won't play it, and then we'll get back and play 3 games or 5 games in one night or whatever. And I always have such a good time with it. It's an incredible game, and I think the potential for the game, like if the game lives up to what I think the potential for it is, I could see this being in my top 10. Like last year, again, I had it at number 12.
Yeah.
But because of the state of the game and how it's made this kind of transfer from Fantasy Flight Games over to another company, it's been on hiatus, there have been no new cards for a while and all this kind of stuff. I think because of the unique deck aspect, even though it is a casual, like a more casual game than games like Magic, because you can just buy a single deck and just play with that, and you don't have to keep up with buying individual cards and all this kind of stuff, it does mean that over time you're playing with the same decks over and over. So if there aren't new sets and there aren't new cards being released, eventually there's less reason to come back to it if you can't modify the same deck that you've played with now 20, 30 times. So the game is just in this weird kind of purgatory, limbo purgatory kind of state, whatever you want to call it, where I've already ordered, there's like, the game has been kind of refreshed. I've already ordered, I think 6 decks or 8 decks or whatever from this new set that are expected to ship in, I think, January or February. So I think 2023 is going to be a big year for the game. I think it's really going to come back in a big way. The new company, Ghost Galaxy, that has taken over, I think has done an excellent job in terms of all their kind of transparency and communication, getting people hyped up about the game, and addressing a lot of the flaws and just opening up the game to more people. So I'm really excited about the future of this game, and I could see it rising a lot higher. It's just in a weird spot where it has fallen because of lack of play and just, again, the game state being kind of in this weird middling state right now. But one of the most fun 2-player games I've ever played, and is just, and I've shown it to a lot of people who've really loved it, but I think people have the same thing with, like, there's a barrier with getting it played more often, and the fact that it's 2-player only obviously means it doesn't get played as often as other games that have that flexibility of player count. But I can't wait to play this with you more, because I know we fell in love with it when it came out at the same time, and then I kept playing when you kind of drifted off into Marvel Champions, and I can't wait for these new decks to get here so we can play it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to playing more Keyforge, because it is a really, really fun game, and I'm excited. I'm going to get back into it with a lot of other people when those
exactly.
Comes out.
And we'll hopefully do another one of those sealed deck tournaments, which is where the game is at its funnest.
Totally.
Anyways, Keyforge, unlike anything else I've played out there.
Awesome. Number 21, last one for this video for me, was 15 last year, so it's dropped 6 spots.
I think I know what this is.
And that's Ghost Stories. Yeah, Ghost Stories is a fantastic cooperative game that is
Some would say one of the best, right?
Yeah, my favorite cooperative game. And it is so satisfying when you win, because it's a very difficult game. And it's even satisfying when you lose, because you usually are close and you can usually see the places that you made mistakes in or where you let things get out of control. It's kind of that aspect of a lot of cooperative games, having to manage things that are on fire and manage things that are going wrong. In this case, it's the ghosts and the spirits and stuff like that that are coming out and attacking different players. But the fact that all the locations in the 3x3 center grid are in different positions every time you play, it's not a huge change, but it's enough of a change with which one's in the middle and which ones are where and which powers are in the game from which players. And each player can have 2 different powers, so you could have a different experience every time with different combos. It changes enough that even when you beat the game, you're not done playing it, like it can happen with some cooperative games. You feel like you want to come back, because even the boss character that came out that game is one of, like, I don't know, 11 different options or something like that. So even I haven't seen every single one that's come out. So if you want to see a different one every time, you could have a different experience. So it's just a really satisfying, punishing cooperative game that almost every time I've played it, we've played back-to-back games too, like with different groups. For some reason, because you lose and you're like, let's do it again.
Yeah,
right?
and and when you come back to it after not having played for a while, you tend to lose badly.
Yeah,
like the first time we're like, I'm not packing this game away. I'm pissed off. Like, we're gonna set this up and go again. Like,
it's a game that I if you haven't played it and you like cooperative games, definitely check it out. There's actually expansions for it too that I haven't experienced, that I'm actually kind of eager to get if I can get Ghost Stories to the table more often, just to like introduce more people and have a fresh experience myself. So really solid cooperative game.
By far the toughest one out there that we've played. If you don't like losing a lot in your co-op games, like if you prefer winning, then maybe stay away from this one. But if you're like us and you like that feeling of losing a bunch to finally scrape by with that win, like there aren't many better options out there.
Ghost Stories 21.
Awesome. I hope to play it again more this year, because it's been a while for me.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, and number 21, last one for me in this video, new to my list. This is, I think there's only one more game, or maybe 2, that are in my top 20 that are new to the list. So this is one of the highest kind of like debuts on the list. My number 1 game of 2021 that I just talked about, and that is Great Plains.
Wow.
Yeah, this game continues to surprise me every time I play it. For a game with such simple rules, one of the simplest rule sets this high up on my list. Yeah. You basically get 20 turns each, aside from your initial starting 3 setup turns where you're taking turns placing these caves. So it's a game with a 2-player only game, plays in about 20 minutes with a variable map setup. You flip these kind of hexagonal tiles and set them up. And then you're basically taking 20 turns each back and forth, and all you're doing is you're placing a piece on the board either next to one of your 3 starting caves or next to one of your other starting pieces. There are spots on the board that give you one of 3 different types of abilities, either a horse that can let you move 2 spaces instead of 1, an eagle that can let you jump over the mountains that normally can't be traversed in any way, or there's a bear which lets you push your opponent's pieces either into the mountains or off the board. So there's these little subtle, like that's pretty much almost all the rules. Like there's a couple rules in terms of like how you score points and the way the game works, but the way it plays out is just right from the setup and just looking at the map and trying to figure out where's the ideal place to put a cave, where do I put my first thing, you know, where's the meadow that we're going to be maybe competing for the most points for, or do I try to make a play for that big meadow, or do I hope that my opponent overcommits there and I'll instead go to that other side of the map where there's these 3 meadows that I can get for cheaper. So there's some math to it where you're thinking like, how many pieces am I going to have to place in that meadow to win it? Is it worth paying like 5 or 6 pieces to get that many points, or can I use those more efficiently elsewhere? And the game of tempo with like someone's putting you in a tough spot somewhere, so you can either try and fight them there, or you can put pressure somewhere else on the map to make them reconsider. What do you want to go for and like say goodbye to the other thing that you're trying to fight for? So I just feel like I've played it like 10 or 12 times now. Almost every time, we always compare Caesar to Great Plains because they're released in the same year. They both are games that when we pull them out, we usually play a best of 3 or just 3 games straight up. Plays in about 20 minutes, and for my most played game of 2021, I'm just surprised at how much, like, how difficult the decision is on every single turn, and that combination of the long-term strategy that you can form from the start with the tactical adjustments you have to make every single turn. There just aren't many games that do that in 20 minutes for me. So I think it's a game that could even rise higher for me in the future as I play it with more and more people. But yeah, it's just an incredible game and a real testament to the, like, this is one of the cleanest, most polished, like, simple games I've played. So yeah, Great Plains.
I played a couple times. I did really enjoy both plays. I had some questions about a couple things that I'm wondering how it'll resonate with me over multiple plays, but I just, there are questions they're not, I don't know for sure. Right. I just need to play it more. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it, and I understand why. I'm still surprised by how much you enjoyed, I think.
I am too, honestly. I can say, like, the more I think about it, I'm like, is it that good? And I'm like, yeah, it really is.
Yeah, like just missing the top 20, that's awesome.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, no, it's, I mean, it's not surprising to me that it's on your list, maybe a little bit where it is. I thought maybe it would have been like 30 to 40 range, but yeah, either way.
If you had asked me a few weeks ago, just like, where would you guess? I would have guessed probably 30, 40 range too, but as I kept looking at games, I thought, I like it more than this game. I like it more than this game. So yeah, it found its way up to 21. Great Plains.
That's it. So all that's left is our top 20 games of all time. Stay tuned in the next few days, 3 days, whatever it is, and we're going to have 20 to the 11, and then after that we'll have 10 to 1. So thank you so much for sticking around with us. If you want to make leave in the comments as we go through this guesses of what you think is going to pop up in future videos, or surprises that you haven't showed up yet, or now you wonder if they're going to be not on the list at all or whatever. Like, let us know. We're always going to be responding to them and reading them, and through the holidays especially. So otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.